Everyone. So today we will going to discuss the new economic policy 1991. Now what was before 1991? Before 1991, India was just a self-sufficient economy. Due to this, the average GDP growth rate was around 3 to 4%. Now then what was after 1991? So after 1991, the India was become the demand and supply economy, due to which the average growth rate was around 8 to 9%. So let us now understand one by one about liberalization, privatization and globalization. Now, before that, let us understand what we mean by economic reforms. Economic reforms or economic policies are directed to accelerate the pace of economic growth and development. So, these are the policies, that is, the new economic policies are implemented just as to pace the overall growth and economic development. It has basically three elements: liberalization, privatization, and globalization. Now, what is liberalization? Liberalization of the economy means freedom of the producing units from direct or physical control imposed by the government. So, as I have said, before 1991, India was a self sufficient economy, which means India was very restrictive towards its industrial policies. And due to this, there was many licensing system. So some of the reforms under liberalization are: first, abolition of industrial licensing. This is the first and most important reforms under liberalization. After the policy of 1991, most of the licensing has been abolished except few like nuclear, medicine, or any other chemical work. Now the second one is contraction of public sector. Before 1991, most of the industries being run by with either by the central government or by the state government. Later on, the government liberalized its policies and allow the private companies or the individuals to do business. Now third, freedom to import capital goods. Before 1991, it was very difficult for the Indian businessman to import capital goods and technologies from foreign countries. After these policies, the Indians or the business houses were allowed to import capital goods and technologies from outside countries. RBI from being a regulator to a facilitator. Before 1991, RBI was just a regulator. It means only the regulation part of the banking system being looked after by the RBI. But after the crisis of 1990 and the policy of 1991, RBI was given more power and responsibility towards the banking system. It allows the RBI to frame the monetary policies in our country. Therefore, it has become the facilitator of the banks. Next, emergence of private banks. Before 1991, the whole banking system was ruled and governed by the state government or the central government. After the policy of 1991 or after the liberalization, many private banks were allowed to do business like HDFC Bank, ICICI Bank or Axis Bank. Next, allow foreign investors to invest in domestic market. The foreign institutional investors are those investors who invest in the local share market. So after the 1991, the foreign institutional investors, that is the FIIs, were allowed to invest in the local market so that the economic growth can be boosted up. Next, simplification of tax structure. Earlier, the tax rigidity and toughness become a problem for the economy. So the government look after the tax structure and tries to simplify it so that it would be easy for the private industries as well as for the common people to understand and to pay taxes. Next, one of the most important points under liberalization was devaluation of domestic currency. The whole and sole purpose of devaluation of the domestic currency was to boost the international trade. As the value of domestic currency decreases, the demand for local goods will increase in the international market. So, therefore, the trade deficits before 1991 can be reduced and hence export can be increased. Now, next and the last point under liberalization was removal of restrictive trade barriers and encouraging domestic traders to participate in international trade. Before 1991, as India was a self-sufficient economy, so there were quota system, licensing system was there in the trades, and tariff system was also there. So therefore, it was very difficult for the Indian traders to trade with the foreign countries. So after the policy, the tariff system or the quota system have been abolished and encourage the local traders to participate in the international trade. Now, the next one is privatization. Now, what is privatization? Privatization is the process of involving the private sector in the ownership or operation of a state owned enterprise. Now, let us understand what is privatization. As we have said, India was a self sufficient economy, so most of the things were controlled by the government. Later on, government realized that each and everything cannot be fulfilled or cover up by the government, so it allows the private individuals or the private companies to do the business or to set up industries. Now, some of the reforms under privatization are outright sell of the government enterprises to the private entrepreneurs. It means some of the sick industries or some of the industries were sold by the government to the private enterprises, which the government were unable to run. The next, withdrawal of the government ownership and management from mixed enterprises, that is jointly owned by government and private entrepreneurs. In this, some of the industries were there which was governed by private as well as by the government. So therefore the government allows the private company to control over those enterprises and to run it, so that the government should not intervene in the business process. Next, disinvestment in the form of partial sale of shares of the government companies to private individuals. So there are certain companies like Coal India, ONGC, whose partial sale of shares take place, which is called as disinvestment. In this process, to increase the liquidity of fund, the government sell some of the shares of those companies so as to increase the money inflow in the economy. So these are some of the reforms under privatization. Now the question is why we need to privatize. What are the main reasons behind privatization? Now students, let us understand one by one. The first point is most public sector enterprises turned into a social burden. Mounting losses of public sector undertakings become unsustainable. So as we know that once we get a job, especially government job, we believe that we have a job security. The same mindset creates a problem for those industries or for those government companies. So the people who are working there becomes a social burden for the government to pay them to take care of their social benefits. Hence, those PSUs, public sector undertaking, face a lot of losses, due to which the privatization has to be done. The next point is leakages, pilferages, inefficiency, and corruption had become so common in PSUs that their privatization is the only option. So, the very point we can understand is that there is a lot of corruptions, there are a lot of leakages from the industries, due to which all those companies and PSUs had to face a lot of problems. And because of this things, the privatization has to be done. Next, and the last one is globalization. Now, what is globalization? Globalization is integration and the interconnection the economy of a country with the economies of other countries under conditions of free flow of trade and capital across border. So, before 1991, India has a very restrictive policies. So, therefore, it does not allow the traders, the businessman to participate in the international business, as well as it does not allow the international firms and the country to participate within our economy. So, therefore, globalization was needed. In globalization, there is an integration among the people. There was an interconnection with of the economy, with which human capital can flow from one place to another place, where capital goods can flow from one place to another place, where we can interlink ourselves with rest of the world. And as a result, now we can see that through internet we can get any news across the world from our at our home. Now, some of the strategies to promote globalization. The first one is increase in equity limit in foreign investment. It means in foreign direct investment, the participation of foreigners has been increased. For example, in multi-retail brand. Earlier it was around 25%, which was later increased to 51%, which means it encourages the foreign investors to invest in multi-retail brand. Likewise in other sectors too, the increase in equity limits has been done by the government to promote globalization. Next point is partial convertibility, then long term trade policies, reduction in tariffs, withdrawal of quantitative restrictions. So, these are some of the policies which was adopted or strategies which were adopted under globalization so that the integration and interconnection among the nations can be done. So, at last, let us understand what are the merits of new economic policies. The first one is vibrant economy. Before the 1991, as I said, the average economic growth was around 3 to 4%, and after 1991, the growth rate was around 8 to 9%. From this, we can understand that after the implementation of this policy, our economy was growing and growing at a very faster rate. Next, stimulate the industrial production. Before 1991, few industries were there in our economy. Therefore, the employment opportunity was less in industrial sector. But after the liberalization process, the employment opportunity has been increased in the industrial sector as well as in the tertiary sector. A check on inflation. A check on inflation means before 1991, as the production was very less and demand was more, due to which the inflation was increasing. Now, after the policy of 1991, we started importing from foreign countries as well. So, therefore, the supply also increases, hence, the prices were going down. Control on fiscal deficit. As I have said, the fiscal deficit of the government was too high. In fiscal deficit means the borrowings was too much and government expenditure was too much, and on the other hand the revenue collection of the government was very less. So therefore, after these policies, the government started getting more and more taxes from the local industries, and less investment was done by the government side. And the other points like inflow of foreign investments, recognition of India as an emerging market, a shift from monopoly to competitive market. So from all these points we can conclude that after the new economic policies, many industries and many private companies were set up, and because of this there was a competitive edge and market was created. Before that, many monopolies has been set up. So it is a beneficial for the common people as they are getting better products with a lesser price, and on the other hand employment opportunity has also increased. So these are some of the merits of the new economic policy of 1991. And finally, let us discuss some of the demerits of new economic policies. Neglect of agriculture. So from these points we can understand that there is no gossips about agriculture. Very few policies were taken up by the government in the advancement of agricultural sector. So this is one of the demerit. Next, urban concentration of growth process. So the industries which were coming out from the country were basically focused on the metropolitan cities, and because of this the rural areas have been neglected. Therefore there was still problems with the rural areas. Now the next point is economic coloniali- colonialization. So in economic colonialization, most of the industries were started earning and earning and earning. Because of this, the richer has become more rich and the poor has become more poorer. So this is one of the problem or the demerits of the new economic policies. And the last points are spread of consumerism, lopsided growth process and cultural erosion. So some of the points what we can conclude is that after the new economic policies there were some problems within the economy, but overall we can find that the present scenario, the overall growth in all the sectors has happened just because of the new economic policies of the country. That's it. Thank you and have a nice day.